will be to let you know that this meeting of the Budget Committee is being conducted electronically pursuant to Governor Bill Lee's Executive Order 16. I would like to ask for a motion that conducting the meeting electronically is necessary to protect the public health, safety, and welfare in light of the coronavirus.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion from Commissioner Johnson. Do I hear a second? And a second from Commissioner Piercy. We'll also let this stand for our roll call. If you would call roll, please.
Mr. Dodd?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Gooch? Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Piercy?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
No volume, Stevens.
Still can't hear you. Commissioner Allen?
We're reading lips now, but we got you.
Can't hear Commissioner Allen either.
Yes.
There you go.
I'm not muted.
Now I got you.
Awesome.
Commissioner P?
Yes.
Now we got through the technicalities.
So what is that, 6?
6, yes. Commissioner Gooch is not present.
Oh, there he is.
Oh, he came in on us. You want to vote on this, Commissioner Gooch? A raise for me? I know.
The executive order.
Executive
16.
order.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a full house. Welcome, everybody. Okay, the first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the October meeting, and I'll call on Commissioner Gooch to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have read the minutes and find everything to be in order. Motion to approve.
Motion?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens? Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes. Okay, motion carries. First up is the investment report, and Tab's out tonight. So Lisa, you're going to take care of that for us, I believe.
Yes, sir. They had no bidding activities this month. The LGIP rate is 0.21%. However, with his arrangement with the bank, our effective rate is 0.47%.
Okay, you've heard the report. Are there any questions for Lisa? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. Commissioner Stevens, I saw you say second, but I'm still not getting any volume out of you. But we'll put him down for a second on that. Call roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
He said yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes. Thank y'all. Okay, next up is fund condition. Of course, that's Lisa again.
Starting with development tax, in October, we received $460,500 for development tax, and that brings our year-to-date total to $1,864,875. Moving to our cash report, at the end of October, our cash balance is totaled $337,771,000, with operating funds being $240,331,000, borrowed funds $97,440,000. One thing that I want to bring to your attention on this is the last item, 189-2020 Future Middle School. When we borrowed this last one in September, I had on the list 17 million. Let me see, where's my list? It's around 17 million for Laverne Middle School. When we were going through, and what was approved was everything except design, which was $850,000. Now, I had the design fee in the total money, but what got approved through resolutions excluded that $850,000. they will need part of that for that project. But I dropped it just so that things followed the resolutions of the committee. I've just dropped it, has marked to drop it into a separate fund by itself, a separate project, 2020 Future Middle School. Then as the BOE pulls that project down, they may need to move that money over. I've asked on those that are on the school committee, Health and Ed, that Teresa will drop that on that report as well, showing it as a future middle school, just to have that money, because it's a 1/3 shared. We just got to make sure that that money gets to either to a middle school or it's separated appropriately. Does anybody have any questions on cash? If not, I will move on to the revenue review. Interesting to note on this, you saw it on the development tax. We have a decrease of about 28% compared to prior year in the development tax. Our hotel motel tax is 20% less than where we were at this point last year. However, our sales tax countywide, all governments included, is up 11.78% over the first 4 months of reporting of last year. It was 3 months reporting. So people are still spending money. On this, October is the first big money that the trustee collects. You can see at the end of October, for the 2020 tax roll, he has already collected 7.34%. That's almost a full percentage point above where he was last year. Okay, so all the other funds, I think, are all green for you, except for, let me get to that one. It's on the second page. We're still just kind of watching the drug control fund. It's kind of somewhat less compared to the other years, but I know that the Sheriff's Department monitors their cash in that fund along the way, so they're not going to spend unless the money's there. The other point is in the general debt service, the total other financing sources that's related to some sales refunding these bonds that we just did and got a really fantastic rate, and we almost hit $4 million in savings on that refunding. But that's just showing, it looks out of whack just because we don't have the budgeted numbers in there yet for the refunding. And that's my report.
Questions on the report?
By the sales tax being up 11% more than usual, does that help offset in the others that are off the other direction?
Yes, yes.
Is it very significant, or is it just a minute portion?
Now, the sales tax, when I say that percentage, it's really the rate that the school board sees in the general purpose school fund. So, we budgeted conservatively. Think about at the time we were budgeting sales tax, at that time it was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen with this COVID? So we were conservative. I think, though, the Board of Education did recognize additional sales tax in their budget for the current year. Yes, to answer your question at the very beginning, yes, it does help.
Okay, thank you. I move to approve a report.
Have a motion?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Dodd, thank you. Any further questions? Call roll, Mark.
Mr. Dodd?
Yes.
Mr. Gooch?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. P?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Next on the agenda is risk management. And Mr. Elam.
Commissioners, in your 264 fund, you see the graph comparing last year numbers, revenue and expenditures compared to this year's year-to-date numbers. On the tracker on the second page, for the 2020 calendar year, October number, you will see $7,310,226 in revenue compared to $6,680,115. And for the total for the calendar year, you will see $813,671 in revenue compared to expenditures $68,328,164. And you see the difference of a negative $514,493. Number of employees, total enrollment, we had 6,282. For the fiscal year 2020, you will see the revenue at $19,506,718 compared to expenditures with $28,144,932. And your difference, you will have $8,638,214 in the negative. In the 266 fund, you'll see that this month was up compared to last year. And in comparison, for October, this year we had $51,316.04. And of that $51,000, $2,096.96 was workers' comp. OGI was $49,219.08. Year-to-date, last year there was $141,080.27. This year there's $206,902.36. For the legal expenses, month of October is for the county attorney is $30,494.62. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
You've heard the report. Are there any questions for Mr. Elam?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve the report, Commissioner Johnson. Do I hear a second? Second. Commissioner Gooch seconds the motion. Any other questions? Call roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, next you have a budget transfer request.
Yes, sir. I have the budget transfer out of line item 101, 51920 clerical into overtime, 101, 51920 187, $9,000. And this is just to give you a little bit of explanation. In this past year, we have changed our clinic vendor and had it to bid out. We had life, AD&D, short-term, long-term disability vendors all have changed this year, have been bid out and have changed. And then it's also that we are about to bid out it's out for bid, and the preparation for the medical, dental, vision, and the stop loss for the employees' benefits. And that will be, I think it opens to purchasing about December, I think it's December the 3rd. Don't hold me on that, but I believe it's December the 3rd. Those bids will be open.
That money, is that for a number of personnel or just one?
It's more than one. There's one that's already maxed out, and there's money saved just because he's had open positions. So we were just trying to move it down to take care of all this, these large balances in his.
Well, we're required under law to keep those paid down, so.
Well, it hits a point and you don't have a choice. We
Yeah.
have to pay it, so I'm just going ahead and get these taken care of now.
Okay, you've heard the request.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Allen makes the motion to approve.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Johnson. Hearing no further discussion, call roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you.
All right.
Ed.
Thank you, Commissioners. Have a good evening.
Next up is the general fund budget transfer for recovery court. And Trish, is she here tonight? Yeah, there you go. Welcome.
I'm requesting a transfer of money from our 53330-599, which was other, of $30,000, and moving that into 53330-169-201 and 212. To give you an explanation on this, prior to my assuming this position, there was an agreement with the workhouse to move $30,000 from their budget to ours in order for us to provide some treatment services in their facilities. In order to do that, we needed a part-time personnel to go into the facility to teach the classes. So we are requesting to move that money in order to fund that.
Okay, so we're not talking about any new money.
No, sir.
Anybody else have a question for?
Yes,
Brady.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you. So is Doors of Hope still affiliated with the program or with the court system?
My understanding is that Doors of Hope is not providing the classes in the workhouse at this time, at least in that capacity. I think they're coming in and doing some faith-based programming, but not the evidence-based programming that we supply.
Are they in support of this transition? Have they been part of the dialogue? And which committee, did this go through public safety? Or which committee?
It did go through public safety. I was not present for the dialogue when this occurred. I was just present for the after effects of that. I'm not certain if they were at the table when that agreement was made or not. But I know that the transition occurred prior to my coming on board on May 6th.
This was approved unanimously in public safety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions for Ms. Brady? Hearing none, I'll open to a motion.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion, Commissioner Johnson, and a second, Commissioner Piercy. Any other discussion? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch? Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Brady. Okay, next up is a application for hazardous material emergency preparedness grant for the emergency management. And Chris, welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, I was up trying to email as we were going through this meeting. EMA is requesting the permission to apply for a hazardous material grant through the state. This will allow our personnel, fire, EMS, police, to attend what's called hazmat IQ, and it helps identify substance and what type of PPE that we need to provide for our responders in a systematic approach. I've attended this class myself a couple of years back, and it's very helpful and an easier way to predict what that hazardous material, how it will be harmful, or how to act with that chemical. It's an 80-20 grant. I believe our portion of it is $1,190. 80-20.
Chris, is this different type classes from yearly? I mean, you usually have refresher grants on hazmat materials, so how's this different?
This is actually put on by a company that travels all over the nation. This is a more robust type training. It's mostly in classroom. Actually, it deals with the periodic table. What is solids, what is liquids. Finding that our responders a lot of times could use their turnout gear as more of a protection than actual hazmat suits. So we can get in there and provide rescues as quickly as possible. So that it allows us to assess the situation quickly and have some type of response.
Okay, thank you. This did pass public safety unanimously also. Commissioner?
Okay, according to the last page here, it's a 75-25 match.
I believe it was
9,600 and 2,400, is that right?
I believe it was 80-20.
I'm looking on the last page where it says calculating the match, total funds 9,600 and matching funds 2,400. Am I reading something wrong, or?
I'm not sure.
It's in red, the last page. Is this 75-25 grant?
Page 6? Okay. Information that I received was incorrect. I apologize. The information I received was incorrect. It's 75-25.
So this is what we've got to go with?
Yes,
okay. Motion to approve.
I have a motion.
Second.
It's a second. Commissioner Gooch, thank you. Any other questions for me?
This is Robert Stevens. On that page 6 there, it says that that's just an example for calculating the match. It doesn't say that that's the actual dollars that are spent on it, and it looks to me like it's 80-20 on the calculation.
Well, this is the guideline to go by, basically. It could be the 84-20 what he said, correct? This is just an example, Robert.
That's what it says.
75-25. So if it's 84-20, it'd be 75-25 with that, correct, Chris?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
From what I've been informed, it was 80-20. Our portion of it would be $1,190.
Okay. So my motion still stands to approve.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Allen. I have a question.
You're recognized. Go ahead.
Two things. One is on the match. If you scroll 2 pages past, it's numbered as page 9, but I don't think that's actually what it is in the document. Chris is right. I mean, it says there that the match is equal to 20%. So between now and next Thursday, we need to get the right numbers in there, and I trust Mark and Lisa can give us those by then. My reason for just stopping the vote was only because I had a question. How many people are we going to get trained at this price? Is it a train the trainer and they bring this knowledge back, or will you be sending supervisors? I wasn't clear exactly how many folks get trained for this price.
Usually it's multiple. To be honest with you, I attended this same class in Franklin, and we had approximately 80 people in that class, the ones that wanted to attend. It was sponsored by, I believe, Williamson County Emergency Management back a couple of years ago. And they also, with those responders, provide response aids, such as that periodic table and how it breaks it down. So they receive items to help us later on as well. As far as I know, during that time, it's multiple personnel. Like I said, it's basically in classroom, so we could probably fill up the classroom. I'm hoping that it'll be more and COVID will be gone and we won't have to worry about that.
Very good, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other discussion? Okay, Mark, go ahead and call roll.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the Highway Fund budget transfer, and I believe Lisa's going to do that, and that's also a request for a grant application. Lisa?
Yes, sir. The first one is a request to move $200,000 from engineering services to other contracted services. And it's for the Plainview schools.
Mr. Chairman?
Christiana School.
Commissioner Dodd, you're recognized.
This came through Public Works this week with unanimous approval. It's just moving funds that we've already approved previously. I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Dodd,
Second.
second, Commissioner Johnson. Any other questions on this item? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson? Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Okay, Lisa, please continue.
Okay, the other point is as a request to apply for a BRIC grant, Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grant. It's a 75-25%. The request is $1.9 million that we'd like to apply for. And speaking with...
I think it's 1.95 million.
1.95, yeah, 1.95. The request is to apply, and talking with Greg Brooks, these expenditures are going to have to be spent on the infrastructure on additional roads around this Christiana site. And if we can get 75 of it covered, that's what we would like to do. As he said, expenses are going to happen anyway, whether we do this grant or not do this grant for the roads around there. So it is a request to try to get some of that covered through this BRIC grant opportunity.
This is part of item number 11, if you're looking for that. I believe it only covers, I believe they're asking for the engineering and design.
Right, just
only.
engineering and design.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion
Second.
and a second. Commissioner Dodd, any other questions about this grant request for the road improvements? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes. Okay, motion carries. All right. Next up is the ambulance service and a fund budget amendment. Welcome.
Good evening. We were awarded the OJP Paul Coverdale Forensic Award for Medical Examiner Lab Grant. It's for the fiscal budget period 11/1/20 through 6/30/21. It's a 2-year grant to expand facilities, to add a forensic medical examiner lab, equipment, training, and supplies. The total awarded is $170,676, and that amount is distributed among several line items, and those are listed on the budget amendment request.
Okay, this item was seen at Public Safety and passed unanimously.
Does the amount of the grant cover the total expense of what it will cost to do this?
Yes, it's a.
Yes.
It's 100%
Denise is here.
grant.
She's shaking her head yes.
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Piercy makes a motion to approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Commissioner Johnson seconds. Any other discussion on this budget transfer? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is a drug fund budget transfer. Preble, welcome.
We're requesting approval of a drug fund budget transfer to purchase a narcotics vehicle in an amount of $30,000.
We saw this in public safety. This is part of the confidential drug money that, you know, basically we're not giving an explanation, but this is for a narcotics vehicle. So.
It's no new money, it's just a transfer of money, correct? Motion to approve.
Yes.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, I have 2 seconds there. We'll count Commissioner Dodd on this one. Okay, any other questions for Preble? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, number 11 is an application for Building Resilience Infrastructure and Communities Grant. And who's going to do that one? Is that Lisa or the mayor?
Either way. So I did jump the gun on the earlier brick grant. It is a part of this. It's just another project under this Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program. I spoke to it about the roads, but there are other opportunities, and you want to take it?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So many of you know that for probably the last year and a half, almost 2 years, we've been looking to locate a new fire hall in Rockville. And we had property, Mr. Jim Thompson had offered a piece of property, I don't remember the name of the road, right off of Highway 99 that he owned. We did soils test on that, and the soils didn't work. So he offered another piece of property back behind where his mini storage warehouses are. That didn't work as well. So we regrouped. We reached out to Mr. Spurlock and asked him about placing a joint EMS and fire combo building in Rockville based on a CTAS study that was done before Mr. Lauer came to work here. He was a CTAS, and the CTAS study that was done identified those areas of where to locate new fire halls. So by combining these, this brick grant has become available. We had a lady that came down this past month from Tasser, from TEMA, because it's a federal grant that comes through TEMA and they would administer it. So there are icons that are on this sheet, and for every icon that you can adapt your building to makes it higher on the list of the grant being accepted, if that makes sense.
If you go to page 6 of 6, of that first document. Looks, it's little icon things.
So if you look on your SharePoint, you'll see those icons. And so what we try to do is sit down with Mr. Well, I think we have identified as many icons as possible for the submission on this brick grant. We, in order to make it a community safe room in the middle of the preliminary design that we had Klein Sweeney come up with, is it would be a tornado-proof community room in the middle of, you'd have ambulance on one side, fire and rescue on the other side, 2 bays for fire trucks, 1 bay for ambulances that could back in, back to back. We could expand at some other later point in time. We're looking to place both facilities, start out and public safety approved at the last meeting to move forward on 2 while we're applying for the brick grant. And if we are fortunate enough to get the brick grant, because it's competitive, then we'll do 3 more facilities. 1 in Christiana, 1 in Walter Hill, and 1 on Almaville at the old school property. So what we want to do is incorporate these buildings on property that we already own. We don't want to go out and have to buy property. So the site identified for Rockville is right next to the elementary school in Rockville. If you're looking at the school, it would be the property to the right, and that property is adjacent to the sewer line that's in the city, so we could tap onto that. The other, in talking with Chairman P. and Walter Hill, would be to locate this facility closer to the road on right in front of the current or the existing.
You said Walter Hill. You meant Kittrell.
I'm sorry. I meant Kittrell. Sorry. Don't get your hopes up, Commissioner P. Commissioner Piercy, we'll get out to Walter Hill. Okay, that's in the plan. But we'll start out with Kittrell and put it closer to the road in Kittrell than where the current volunteer fire department is. So Kittrell Volunteer Fire Department would occupy one side. We'll have an ambulance on the other side for that section of that community that's continued to develop. But we got direction from Public Safety the other night to proceed while we're applying for the brick grant on the other 3 locations with Rockville and with Kittrell. And not to proceed with the building, but only to proceed.
Well, this one is request to apply for the grant.
Yeah. We're requesting to apply for the whole grant, okay? And we'll come back under other business and I'll make the proposal on what we're asking for as far as the 2 locations. I was trying to combine them too, but we probably don't need to. Probably need, Mr. Chairman, a motion to apply for the brick grant.
Yeah, this first step is just to give us permission to apply for the grant, which would allow us to, the plan was out of public safety is for the 5 locations to be built from this grant. And basically the way it was explained then, we would end up paying for 1 station and basically get the other 4 free, is the way that grant would be basically spent if we're lucky enough to get all that.
But basically, this is just for applying for the grant.
This is
okay,
a motion.
Then we'll address the other
motion to apply. You're correct.
Okay, and then we'll address the other 2.
And other business
funding for the other 2. Okay, that time. Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second to allow us to apply for the grant. And as I said, this passed out of public safety. Any other questions about the grant? None. Call roll, please.
Mr. Dodd?
Yes.
Mr. Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes. Motion carries.
Now I have a question.
Commissioner Piercy, you recognize.
The last 4 years, I've tried to get an ambulance service out in the Lascassas area, and everybody knows we could use a new fire hall along with it. My question is, how did you arrive at picking Eagleville or Rockvale and Kittrell over the other parts of the county?
Well, you may have missed it, but I stated that when Mr. Kevin Lauer was with CTAS, he did the evaluation based on population and gave us a map probably a year and a half ago, maybe going on 2 years, a heat zone of where they projected that we need to make that location. Mr. Clark, I think, am I correct in saying that it was designated of Rockvale needed to be first? It would put it right in between inside Murfreesboro and Eagleville. Am I correct?
The heat map represented the call volume of what's the hottest in those areas. One of those were identified in Kittrell and the other one was identified in Rockvale during the time of the CTAS study to look at our future growth. Still today, those areas are hot. When I say hot, they're the highest call volume areas that are still identified.
So it was based on call volume and nothing to do with response time?
That was, yes, sir. That was done on call volume. Yes, sir.
Nothing on response time?
Actually, it dealt with fire response and not EMS.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Allen. I have a question.
You're recognized. Go ahead.
This is really just out of curiosity. And how does a community safe room work? I guess I'm curious to know, is it going to be an empty room that we're not going to be able to utilize? And if it is a room that we're utilizing, how is it going to function then as a community safe room if there's things in it? So I'm just curious, how does that work?
I'll let Chris or Mayor handle that one.
So with this design, in the center of these proposed fire, EMS, public safety buildings will be a hardened facility within. So it'll be concrete from ground to ceiling. We will be able to provide occupants up to 60 occupants at one time that are standing. As you know, tornadoes, they go through pretty quick. However, for some reason or another, we had to shelter somebody. We could do up to 30 occupants in that shelter. When we talk about sheltering overnight, things like that, they would move to from a temporary type shelter holding to a more formal shelter, FEMA regulated guidelines. So a lot of times what we've done in the past is, say we had flash flooding in a certain area, we may move them to a temporary till the flash flood recedes, and then they can go back. So that there's certain regulations as far as permanent sheltering that is regulated by FEMA. But in this tornado shelter, we would hold 60 occupants.
So does the room fit empty
no,
in between tornadoes? I guess I'm just curious, how do you use that space, or do you use it?
So that space would be livable. It would be a day room area where we can push chairs to the side and then bring the occupants in. We would use it twofold as a day room for the public safety, meeting room or whatever, and then we push the chairs to the side. So it would be a twofold room.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
Would this also have the capability to function as a command post for natural disasters or any emergencies, etc.?
Yes, sir. So
officials to use?
Yes, sir. So in the front of it, the way we view this is that a lot of times we have that community that's impacted. A lot of times it's an isolated community. We can utilize that command post that's at that facility to run the operations. That it may be down the road, it may be a couple miles down the road, where we can come in here and make decisions on tactical operations, things like that. And that would be located in the front of the building, so that we could determine whether we need to put staging out and things like that that we would do in a command post.
Would it also be included any technology that needed to be for communication purposes and everything,
Yeah,
or
so-
use as a command post?
So what we've done in the here, we have provided laptops to a lot of our commanders. So what our intent is to be able to project our laptop that has those programs on their computers, and we would project them onto a regular standard TV, such as this one up here. We have that capability now. So instead of buying computers and things in there, we just bring our laptop, project it up on the screen. So really we'd need just a few regular standard TVs that would be able to share our display of our laptops.
Actually, to be a multi-purpose room.
Absolutely. Command and control.
But there would also be a tower, and the original concept design that we were looking at, a tower that would have a siren on it for tornado warnings in each one of these rural communities that would alert people, tornadoes coming, and they come fast, like the director said. You got about 15 minutes to get cover, so it would be a protected room that people could go to. I know my wife grabs the cat and we come down here and get in the parking garage, at the city.
So we have found that there's other areas, once that siren alarm sounds, that those doors unlock. It's an automatic switch. So that if we are already out on another call, that facility is not locked up. So as soon as the sirens sound, those doors unlock so that they could go into the safe room.
Well, the command post idea and everything, you're actually thinking outside the box ahead of time. So that's a good idea.
Not to deter mobile command posts such as what we've had over the years, we can use those areas instead of bringing in vehicles and things like that. We can go to that station and run those things from there in those areas.
Any other questions? Commissioner
I've got
Piercy?
one more. This is probably premature because you told me not to get my hopes up. Well, I hadn't. But you made the comment that one would be put at Walter Hill. Why would you put it at Walter Hill and we have ambulance service at Siegel High School and a fire department in Walter Hill already run by the county paid officers?
I'll leave that open, but based on that call volume on what we got from CTAS suggested there as opposed to Las Casas, but as we go further down the road, if we get that grant, then I think the committee should be open to discuss, and both those locations are in your district, Commissioner, so,
Yeah, I'm very aware of that, but the upper portion of my district is pretty underserved, I'll put it that way.
Sure.
And it's more rural than where we've just talked about. And if it's to help the rural community, I think it would need to be out in the most rural area.
Sure. Well, I'm sure you'll be able to share your opinion at that time. But I'm open.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Allen. I have a follow-up question on that.
You're recognized. Go ahead.
Thank you. The report that we made these decisions off of, what was the date of that report? I'm just curious how current it is.
It was a year and a half ago.
I do not recall. I do know that Kevin Lauer did that
CTAS.
survey when he was working for CTAS.
I know it wasn't 2 years ago. It was probably a year and a half ago, Commissioner.
Okay, the only reason that I asked is I was just curious if it took into consideration some of the services that Commissioner Piercy had mentioned. So I just didn't know if those things were, there and available at the time that the report was done. So that's the reason I asked. Thank you.
Again, that report was on fire. It didn't mentioned ambulance service, and as Commissioner Piercy points out, he's got an ambulance station where it's Siegel, I think is the closest to that area.
Siegel and MTSU station that's located on Rutherford Boulevard on the backside of...
Siegel's the closest one to Walter Hill.
Yes, sir, to
About
Walter Hill.
3.5
Yes, sir.
miles.
Yes, sir. You are correct.
Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. Hearing no further discussion, call roll, Mark.
Oh, we've already voted on that item.
Oh,
We've already
I'm
voted.
sorry.
We're ready to go on the next
Me.
item, yes.
Get back in line here. Okay.
Item number 12.
The next item was 12, and we are pulling that from the agenda for tonight. Is that right?
Oh, did we vote on the brick grant acceptance?
Yes, we voted on the brick grant.
I thought we did.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, I was talking.
With the discussion we had afterwards, I was thinking we were building up to it.
Okay.
My mistake. Thank y'all for catching
I'd like to
that.
remove item number 12, Mr. Chairman. We're getting a clarification on that.
All right. So we're skipping 12 and moving to 13, the general purpose school fund amendment. And I see our director headed this way and his sidekick Doug, so. There you go.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We've got one budget amendment here, and 141 budget amendment. And what this is a amendment of the Safe School Grant. What we're doing here is budgeting our revenues and our expenditures for the fiscal year 2020, 2021, and moving a grant that we received from the state for this year, $802,804, over into our what we currently have at $183,715, which will bring our total revenue at $986,514. That's $986,514. We want a motion to approve this amendment for our 2020-21 Safe School Grant, which was previously approved by the state, by the school board back in the last meeting. This money is going to be, some of the big ticket items that we're going to be working on this year with this funding is replacing some of our cameras and DVRs throughout our schools. We're also going to be working on some internal controls with some of our schools for safety purposes and radios.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Allen. This came through Health and Ed and it passed unanimously. I'll make a motion that we approve.
We have a motion from Commissioner Allen for approval.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Dodd.
Second, Sarah. Any other questions for the director? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes. Okay, motion carries. Okay,
All right, this next one is a contract with Federal DOJ Community Oriented Policing Service, also known as COPS grant. Just want to tell you up front, this is not going to be used to add personnel of any kind. The Rutherford County School Safety Director applied for this grant. He was approved $225,001 over a 3-year period. This will be able to provide us improved security with the purchase of APX trunking handheld radios that's used by our school crisis team at each school. This grant does come along with a $25,000 local match per 3 years. It is our hope that we can get this approved so that we can use the state annual Safe School Grant to help meet this need of $25,000 a year.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Allen. This also came before Health and Ed, passed unanimously. I'll make a motion we approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the COPS grant.
Mr. Dodd.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have a motion and a second. Are there any other questions about this grant? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Mr. Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, guys, thank you. Unless you've got
Mr. Chairman,
something else.
excuse me, before y'all leave, I'd like to make one statement. Thank you all for the prudent decision of opening back some of the schools up. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. Thank you for your support.
Okay, next up is a general fund budget transfer for planning and engineering. I see our director, Doug, is headed up this way.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and good evening, Mayor and Commissioners and everybody else who's left in the audience. We just going to be moving a little bit of money in our budget. This is not new money. We're moving some money from our in-service training to our legal notice line item, $2,000. This is due to increased publication costs for our legal notices for rezoning applications. There's additional language required when we do the virtual meetings that need to be included with those, so that makes the notices more expensive. So that's what I'm asking for today.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Piercy.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Dodd. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you, Doug. All right, now we're back to other business. And as we stated a little bit earlier when we were talking about the grant, so, excuse me, Commissioner Johnson, you're recognized.
One other question, Mark, clarify on the donation of the refrigerated trailer in your notes, who made the motion and who seconded it?
That motion, or that item was removed. It
We
wasn't
removed it.
voted on.
We're trying to get a clarification on whether we can actually do that or
Okay.
not from legal.
Okay, just want everything to be copacetic.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll go back to other business, and as we stated under item 11 when we requested to apply for the grant. Anyway, I'm going to turn this over, I guess, either to the mayor, or we'll take care of it from here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have two things tonight under other business, and I'll start out, and Lisa and I are going to address, I'll start out on the brick grant, and then we want to address and at least bring you, the committee, up to date on where we are on the Gov 20 grant, the governor's supplemental grant that we've been doing some capital projects with, and also the CARE grant, and explain to you where we are. Not looking for any real direction tonight, but just as an informative where we are at this point, and how we're trying to pull this money down. So I'll go back to what we've already discussed, is on the brick grant, and there was actually 5 locations. One I left out was Almaville. And that would be at the current fire hall in Almaville in front of the old school on Almaville Road. Tear down that old school that is there and put it out closer to the road, and put in this joint facility for ambulance and fire for that facility. But what is before us tonight is what Public Safety sent us here to do, is to move forward and looking for acceptance to start the architectural and engineering on the 2 locations while we're in process of waiting on the brick grant when we apply. So you've just approved to move forward on applying for the brick grant. We'll make the full submission of the architectural rendering, the cost, etc., on all 5. We're going after all 5, and hopefully we'll get reimbursed on that. But in the meantime, we would like to go ahead. Mr. Klein is here from Klein Sweeney. He came up with the, Bart, if you'd like to come on up, he gave us the architectural rendering, kind of the floor design of what this would actually look like, and to actually plug in all of these icons that are on this brick grant, that we would have the opportunity to be in a good position. And we had a very short window in order to apply for this and get this in that short window. So Mr. Klein, I know, worked late a couple of nights in order to get that turned around, and it's a good looking building. But so what we're looking for right now is from the committee is to go forward with the architectural and design and engineering fees. And I negotiated with Mr. Klein. I told him that I tried to get him lower, but he said he couldn't do it for that. But 100% fee on the first design, and then since we're going to replicate on 2, 3, 4, and 5, we shouldn't have to be paying for 100% architectural design and engineering fees on the additional locations. So he agreed to reduce that. So we pay 100% on the first, and then it's 50% thereafter, right? Correct. Mr. Klein? And so you'll see on your SharePoint, we're looking at a total of between the two, it's divided by 2, it's 5.
I could walk you through this.
Yeah, take us through that.
So
443.
If you look at item E, the first item is the AE fee for the architecture engineering. So for the first building, it's 100% of the fees. Then on the second building, it's 50% of the AE fees, but the civil engineer, we have to pay him again because it's a new site. So we subtract the $51,000. You can follow it through the math. But then we have the other fees of $94,000 under line item E, and that's me putting an estimate because we have not specifically designed the site, but that's stuff like geotechnical, environmental, special inspections. We are having a true FEMA-rated, 2018 IBC-rated tornado shelter, so that requires us to have a third-party inspector and a third-party engineer verify in both the design phase and the construction phase. So those are additional dollars that are kind of not in my wheelhouse of A&E fees, but required for the engineers to do the work. So the total cost for the two buildings is $537,876, of which $94,000 is an estimate on additional engineering services we'll need once we start design. A little bit about the building they touched upon. So the BRIC grant has 7 lifelines that it tries to achieve. We are achieving 6 of the 7 lifelines with this building. It has, as mentioned, a true tornado shelter day room for 60 people. We have a community kitchen and pantry up above that for the storage of water and food to be dispersed. The way the design works is the community kitchen is connected to the day room, which is also connected vertically to the community pantry, so it allows you, if it's it's a corona event or if it's something that we haven't heard of, it kind of it adapts to different events. And then there's sleeping quarters, there's the tornado siren on the front, and so we kind of just went after what made sense, not to just go after everything, but what actually made sense to provide a building that is multifaceted in how it responds to events.
I found it interesting as we were talking through this that it was recommendation from Director Clark and that we needed separate lockable pantries for each shift. Director Clark pointed out, having been a fire chief, that each shift will take each other's food, and so we had Mr. Klein put that into the design to where everybody has their own pantry. So it's a beautiful design on the building, and we think it would be good. with this community room to where it could be utilized by Boy Scout troops to come in and teach life-saving, merit badge or Girl Scouts or any other group to come in and utilize that building when it's not in use or the guys are not watching TV. It's a great opportunity, and I think it would synergize each one of our rural communities of some place to go again. Similar to what we're doing at Kittrell with the ham breakfast. This would be right in front of that location.
Mr. Klein, you were referring to item E.
Yes.
E is an elephant. Were you reading from a document from October 22nd?
November 5th.
Okay, because I don't have that, and that wasn't provided for me, and so none of the commissioners have that document that you're reading from.
Okay.
So
this was updated this morning and sent to the mayor. He called me early, but it's the difference being what you had before was when we designed this. So for the brick grant, what we had to do is we had to say, okay, how much square footage is it going to be? Let's get a building design. We're moving real quick to get this in because that had to be submitted a couple weeks ago. So it was done real quick. So this has been revised to what the design is now, moving forward. So this uses the standard state fee schedule. So that's what we've always done with Rutherford County. It's the standard state fee schedule. In terms of repeat designs, we're actually doing a little bit better like the states on repeat designs. You don't get 50% until your 7th or 8th building. But my engineers that I work with on repeat buildings, they always do it at 50%, other than the civil engineering, because it's less work. Our intention is to hard bid this project under one contract to one contractor so we can save on project management costs because you can utilize one project manager and 2 superintendents. And having the time that we have to get the design right, it's the most affordable way to go, in our opinion, or our recommendation.
Mr. Johnson, you're recognized.
Okay, recap the amount of money you're talking about that you're looking at right now.
Yes. So
537,876 with an additional 94,000.
No.
No, 94's in it.
443,876 is the 876 is architectural and engineering fee. The additional fee is 94,000. So that 94,000 could go down some. I estimated a little bit high to protect us, but that is for stuff like geotechnical engineering, which they have to do the borings when we locate where the buildings are going to go on site. The environmental engineer to clarify and make sure we don't have any blue line streams or cultural resources. Special inspections is required during codes. That's someone that comes through, make sure compaction is right, this, that, and the other. And then the third-party inspector and the engineer for the tornado shelter, that's a third-party structural engineer, which is going to review our structural engineer's drawings, plus that is to get somebody out during construction to review construction. So that's required per the IBC 2018 to have a federal rated tornado shelter.
The bottom dollar you're looking at is 537,876.
Correct.
That's for 2.
That's for both buildings.
Yes, to do 4 or 5, it was 940,000. That was the AE fee, but that didn't include it's actually 94,000 is for 2 buildings for those additional, so that's what, 47. So each one of those buildings, you're going to spend roughly 47,000 on geotechnical, environmental, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so basically you're looking for approval to go ahead with 2 of these units for 537,876, and with the possibility that when this grant is approved, that it will be kicked back to, we will be paying for only 1 building, and the grant will take care of the other 4. Is that correct?
But
It's a 25-75 split.
75 split.
75-25 grant, right? Okay.
And so the way we've timed it with the grant is the county's going to pay the AE fee for the design. If you get the grant, then it'll pay for the construction of the 2, plus the design for the additional 3 and the construction of the additional 3. If you do not get the grant, then you're paying for the design for the A&E, and then you're paying for the construction of those two.
Okay, so we need a motion to move forward with this.
Well, and let me say, you're probably going to say, well, where are you going to get the money? I would recommend to you that we pull this money down from the Gov 20 or that governor's supplemental grant that we have, instead of taking out an ending fund balance or waiting into next year. Let's go ahead and get at least the two for Kittrell and Rockville started with the engineering fees, and by the time he finishes this and the geotech and everything, maybe we'll have a pretty good idea if we're going to get the grant. Okay. This is going to be sometime in the spring anyway, right? Bart, wouldn't you anticipate?
Yes.
So would it be premature to, if a motion is made to approve this, to move forward with it, would it be premature to say, could we look at the avenue to go down of the funding for this? Growth demands and is required to be funded. So development tax that's one of the basic uses for it. So would it be premature to include maybe looking at that as the funding for this?
Commissioner, I agree with you, and normally that's one of the first places I would look. However, we've got how many $1 million? We got several $1 million in grant money that we can apply just for this, and we won't have to use our development tax on it. So the mayor's suggestion, and Lisa's I think also, is to use this existing grant money and apply it toward that. That way we're not out of pocket on any of this. So my suggestion would, make that motion, and I don't know if we need to tie the financing to it or not.
I mean, I would.
Well,
I would.
To take it from which grant is this called?
The governor's local support grant.
Governor's local support grant. If you want to make it, that'd be my suggestion, to use that grant money from the local governor's support grant to finance this architecture fees for these two buildings.
Okay, well, Lisa, I will make the motion, and you word it like it needs to be made.
Marker.
Or somebody make the,
Well, I guess the motion would be to allocate $537,876 from the governor's local support funding to the architect engineering for two fire hall / EMS.
At Rockville.
is that acceptable, Mayor?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, I will make that motion.
And I guess the contract, the engineering contract to come
Coming out right after.
right after.
Okay, so we have a motion, and do we need to add the location on those two?
Need the location right now, or just to,
for
me, it's just the funding.
It's just the funding of the
architect.
Y'all decide to do
So
something
we have
else.
a motion to approve the funding to come from the governor's local grant to build fire hall EMS stations, two of them. And this will cover the architectural fees.
And engineering.
Do I hear a second?
Can I ask a question? Or are you going to wait on your second and then have discussion?
Second.
Yeah, we'll have a second.
Is that
You're recognized, Commissioner Pearson.
Is that Commissioner Gooch? I'm sorry. Okay.
I've had a long day. I've had a hard time understanding some of your numbers. How much is each building going to cost?
Oh, each building is costing $4.3 million.
I understood you to say 2, 3, 4, and 5 were going to be identical. Are they going to be different from the first one? They're going to all be identical?
They're going to all be identical.
Going to all be identical.
Yes.
So other than the site plan and grading, are we going to use the same blueprints to build every building?
We are.
Every one of them?
Every one of them.
They're really nice. But I think it's a little too nice. but that's just my thoughts. I'm going to support it, but it's a real nice design.
It's purely functional design. It's going to be CMU block walls, not wood construction. It's a 40-year building, and you're going to pay for a 40-year building at the end of the day. It's kind of like building a school.
Okay, but basically there would be just some minor monetary adjustments because of some things you mentioned there, right?
What do you mean monetary adjustments?
Money. There would be some more money involved for 3, 4, and 5, or 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah, when you build, okay, so for instance, and if it's pretty similar even in the one that you have, even though the numbers are a little bit different. So when you build 3, the fee on the AE is cut 50%. But the civil engineering fee, you still have to pay because it's a new site.
That's what I was having reference to.
Yeah, and while, you know, most of us say, hey, why are we paying the architect and engineer for, he's already drawn it? Well, we're out there for a year and a half making sure it gets built correctly, under budget, in budget. So I'd go into, you know, the mayor first asked me, can you go to 25%? And my liability and stamp and on the engineers, the 25% won't cover it. So if you actually thought about what I pay a project manager to manage a project, it'll take a project manager, 1 per building to manage it. So if I'm at 278, I'm at 164 to build a building. My engineers are 51 plus another 30%, so they're 80,000. So my project manager, he's going to be handling that project. What does he make a year? He's making $60,000 to $80,000 a year. And that's about what it is. You know, and the tornado shelters are expensive. I'll be honest with you. It's to do a true 2018 International Building Code tornado shelter that's going to withstand. It's got Miami-Dade proof doors. It's got to have its own separate HVAC system. The building around it has to collapse. So we have to put core deck on top of the concrete. So what we're doing, it's got to have a concrete top. We do Williamson County School work. We tried to do it in a gym thinking, oh, just make the gym the shelter. It's the most expensive and worst way to do it. The easiest way to do it is your first floor of any concrete structure because you got a concrete top to it. It's the most economical way to do it.
How many people will it hold?
It'll hold, the tornado shelter will hold 60 people. This building sleeps an additional 32. And the EMS side has enough room for 2 vehicles, and the fire truck side has enough room for 2 vehicles, or they can do one with a brush truck behind it. The pantry upstairs is roughly, I don't want to say this wrong, 250, 300, roughly 400 square feet, about what it is. You know.
Is the tornado room the only sleeping quarters in this structure?
No. So if you look at the back of that drawing, you'll see the beds. See that the floor plan in front of you? If you look at the back, these are all sleep rooms. So those are bunk beds. This is size for 8 per room. 2 female units.
So if we left the tornado room out, there's still places for the fire and EMS to bunk.
Correct.
And if you left it out, what would the traction from the building cost? This way, I'm not hoping
Well, they still have to have a day room.
Yeah.
Right.
It would still have to have a day room of some sort, but it's $50 a square foot times 1,300 square feet. This is the premium, the $67,400 is the premium we're going to be paying for the concrete top on top of that space, and to put day-rated doors and windows. And actually, the way this is designed, this tornado shelter room, the day room, will not have any windows.
Let him use your microphone so they can hear him at home too.
Yeah, we're required to have a microphone under this governor's order.
Oh, okay. So the way it works is the tornado shelter, $50 a square foot is paying to put the concrete cap on it, and that's also going to cover some incidental cost for the the Dade-proof doors, all the stuff you have to have per code to make it a tornado room. So if you took that out, you're roughly saving about $67,400 to make it that next level of a truly rated shelter. But you're still going to have some type of day room component, I would expect, for the public. There's no windows on this tornado shelter. The command center was positioned in the front to be able to have some windows on it, but it's also so your public appearance, if, for instance, if you do have an issue to where the command center has to, it's different. We got Corona now, so there's something always different. They could set up in here, distribute goods or distribute material, and bring in people here to a secure place. And it's also designed in a way to where if you look at where the kitchen entry is, there'll be a pass-through to the shelter. If, for instance, they had to get something from the community pantry up above and they set up a line through the building and out, they could easily take care of that. It's just a purely function-driven plan. It's not trying to be pretty. It's trying to be functional.
Mr. Piercy, one other thing I'd like to mention is part of the reason that they've gone to that design is, if you remember back when we were looking at item 11, there were some icons there, and for getting the grant, the more of those icons you can tick off, the closer you'll get to getting the grants. And the reason that hardened shelter was put there is that's one of the things that the grant money is used for. So that's one more plus as far as us being able to get the grant when we're applying for it. EMS, fire, those are both things that are on there. A community shelter, that's another thing that's on there. There's 7 criteria, and with this building, the way it's designed and what it's designed for, we make 6 of the 7 criteria. So that's why that extra cost for that hardened shelter, part of the reason why it's in there.
All that's good, but when you get yours built at Kittrell, what 60 people are you going to put in it? What are you going to do with the other people that come that can't fit in it? That's my point.
Well, I'd say women and children first. I agree with you.
The first 60's great. You're going to have 100 outside. If it's not there, you don't have that issue. That's what I was looking at.
I agree.
I couldn't pick the 60 to put in it. Not in my community. I could pick a few to leave outside, but I couldn't pick the ones there.
I'll tell you something that's happening in the world of architecture and engineering and codes. So right now, the state fire marshal is under 2012 International Building Code. Your building code in Rutherford County is 2015, if I remember correctly. 2015, and you're adopting 2018. 2018 requires all schools to have tornado shelters. But until the fire marshal adopts 2018 or higher, you're not going to be putting them in because of the cost. You're going to run into a cost issue. Well, in the next year to year and a half, the state fire marshal is going to be switching. They've been talking about it for 2-3 years. They're about there. When that happens, all your new schools are going to have tornado shelters. It's required. You're not going to be able to build it without it once that fire marshal happens. And it's very close to happening. It's going to happen either next summer, year after that. So, I would hate to think of the cost to make a large enough for a whole community, but when you start thinking about structures like that, 200,000 square foot structures or something like that, then you can start thinking about really getting the mass involved. And I think it goes back to what the EMA director was talking about, is how we bring in certain people and cart them out to other places. But I'm getting beyond my expertise.
Did you say that this is a 40-year in the future building?
This is going to be designed as a 40-year building, meaning it's going to take the abuse. It's not going to have. We looked at, for the trusses, both. We're going to look at wood trusses versus steel trusses, but it's going to have a metal deck. It's going to be made of concrete block and brick. It's going to be constructed just like your schools. It's not a wood framed building.
Well, I don't want to be flip about the situation, but I don't think there's too many people in here that's going to be around 40 years from now.
Understood.
Okay, any other comments or questions from?
So in essence, Mr. Chairman, we're looking at the brick grant. We'll be applying for right at this 4 million times 5. So we'll be looking at applying for 20 million, and hopefully we'll get it. But we still want to move forward with the first 2 that were identified before we even knew about the brick grant. This is a new grant, and I think with this presentation, we get ours in early, we got a real good shot at getting it.
Commissioner
I think you've got a motion and a second. Let's vote on it.
Any other discussion?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Dodd, you're recognized.
If you would just clarify for me, so we're embarking on 5 fire halls with EMS, correct?
Yes, yes, sir.
And is this, and it sounds like we would rather fast track it with design and if the grant comes through, we would start construction, it sounds like. Is that correct?
We won't start construction until next budget.
Yeah, it'll be in the next budget year before we started
Agreed. So it's a year from now, not 5 years from now. So how many are we looking at? There's 16 beds in the unit.
32 beds.
At 16 new employees per fire hall per shift? Are we looking at more ambulances? Are we expanding our departments when we contemplate 5 new buildings? Are we consolidating existing dysfunctional buildings?
We have, Commissioner, we've taken that into consideration, but we're still looking at, if we got the grant today, we're still 18 months of construction time. But if we start in July, we'll probably be into 3 more budget years. We'll probably be into the 23, yeah, 23, 24 budget year before we would have to staff.
We're embarking on employing each of these fire halls over the next 2 to 3 years. In addition to the 22 million, we're going to occupy and operate and furnish, correct?
Commissioner Dodd, on the Kittrell Fire Hall and ambulance station, and I can speak for that one, that will be manned by volunteers. There will be no additional cost for personnel for that Kittrell station because, like I said, that'll be a volunteer station. As far as EMS goes, I don't know whether he'll move a truck over there from existing personnel. That'd be a question for them.
And Almaville would utilize that location if we get the grant for that volunteer fire department as well.
Of the 5 units, we have existing space that we'll probably vacate or dysfunctional space, and we'll consolidate into one new space for some of these facilities. Is that correct? Is that what I just heard you say, Robert?
Yes. That is correct. At least it definitely will be for Kittrell because we need the space. We've got extra buildings rented for some of our apparatus now. Also, depending on where the station goes, Commissioner Piercy will have some say on that too. If it was at Las Casas, I'm sure that Las Casas volunteers would, be helping us there. If it's at the Walter Hill area, we already have county employees in the Walter Hill area there where they've got a station, so they could transfer there. So, as far as the cost of new personnel, I see your concern. I have the same. The other one is Christiana, which also has a volunteer group. I haven't spoke to them personally. I don't know if y'all have, Chris, but the way I'm looking at this, we need to expand these stations. At some time in the future, we'll be expanding, hiring more full-time firefighters for the county's department. But in my opinion, as long as we have volunteers that are willing and capable of manning these stations, that's where we need to go and what I'd like to see happen. Hopefully that answered your question there. So that's 4 out of the 5 stations anyway. I'm not sure about Eagle.
One clarification. He was talking about 16 sleeping areas. You said 32?
32. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me.
Question
I thought
for
I
the
counted
chairman.
16 bed icons. I digress on that, though.
Any other questions or comments?
Will this have to go in front of full commission for final approval? Thank you.
Definitely. Mayor, or Lisa, any other comments or questions? Committee? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Allen. I have a question.
You're recognized.
I know some of the grants that we've been dealing with, they are time sensitive, and so decisions are having to be made very quickly. Is this one of those situations? Because I've looked all over SharePoint and I don't have access to the numbers that are being quoted tonight, and I guess I'm just uncomfortable making such a rushed and important decision without accurate information in front of me. So my question to you is, what's the time sensitivity driving tonight's vote?
The only thing that I'll mention is, this was a recommendation that came out of public safety. We've been looking at, in public safety, at expanding our ambulance stations. We've had 5-year plans several times brought to us. Also expanding our fire departments out in the rural areas. So, that's something that we've been discussing in public safety for a while now. As far as the availability of this grant and the money, the numbers you're not seeing, these numbers were finalized today. As far as time period on that, I'll let the mayor speak to that, and looks like they're being scrolled up now on my screen.
Well, and I think under item E is 22,643,000, and what we're showing here is actually less than.
I think they're looking at the whole
this is a
5.
previous, that needs to be taken down. That's not accurate information there because that was a previous letter.
Yeah, but it's actually higher than what we currently have in front of us, right? And it came in actually cheaper than what was posted. When I called, I talked to Lisa earlier this week, and we really wanted to bring before you tonight the 2 locations while we apply for the grant. And so I called Bart, got him at home. He started working on it last night and was able to get us the break out the architectural and engineering just for the 2 locations and not for all 5 locations. And I gave that to Rachel this morning, and I apologize. I shared that with her, and I said, get that to all the members. I'm not sure why it didn't make it and was posted for the members, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, so for instance, the construction cost for the 2 buildings is $8,681,700. Opposed to, I believe, what you're looking at, which talks about construction of 5.
And as Commissioner Piercy pointed out, this is something that will have to come before the full commission before it is finalized.
Just for clarification, Mark, where there won't be any misunderstanding, read the motion where everybody can understand it.
The motion to approve the architectural and engineering fees of $537,876 for 2 locations, and that's it.
Did somebody say they wanted the locations identified, Kittrell and
I think we decided not to do that at this time, just to go ahead and get
that's fine.
2 locations.
I just want to make sure, because I thought I heard somebody make that statement.
I questioned if we needed it, and we evidently don't
That's
need
fine.
it now.
I certainly understand the motion.
Mr. Allen, did that answer your questions?
Did, and I appreciate Commissioner Johnson with the clarification, because if we're only voting on the design and engineering, we've done this in the past when we've anticipated school needs, or additional projects, things like that. So we'll go ahead and pay for the design and engineering if that, design needs to sit on the shelf for a little while. If the money's not there, it's still good. So I am comfortable. I think it's a worthwhile project, absolutely. I just always, function on high levels of information, so the more information you give me, the happier I am. So the fact that we're only voting on design and engineering, I'm comfortable with that. Thank you.
All right.
I guess I should clarify the funding source is from the governor's local funding grant.
And that is part of the motion, that the funding is from the governor's grant there.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion, comments? Call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. P?
Yes. Motion carries. Is there any other business?
Yes, sir. Well, I mentioned we had two things under other business tonight, and this is basically a briefing to let you know, because I believe Commissioner Dodd had asked about it at the last meeting of where we were on the CARE grant. And Lisa and I have been working on this today. I'll turn it over to her, and she can kind of brief you on what we're doing and how we're applying, and using both governors, what we refer to as the Gov 20 grant and the CARE grant, which is the COVID-19 grant that we're able to utilize. If you recall, it was very difficult for us, and what was scaring us is that in order to apply, we were trying to figure out how to spend $4.9 million. Everything was COVID related, and if we suggested it, sent it in, it had to be paid for. And the project implemented, and then they had the ability to turn it down, and then we're stuck with what we've already purchased. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have purchased it if we didn't know we were going to get the grant money. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa. She came up with a brilliant idea of how we're going to work this and then request funding back. Lisa.
Okay, so the mayor spoke to two funding sources, but really there are three funding sources. One, I'm going to refer to the public assistance grant through TEMA. That's one that I always refer to as, in my mind, it's what we use when there's a tornado that comes through and the governor says it's a natural disaster. So we know how those work. And that was the first source of money that was kind of spoken to. Then the next one, well, at the same time, the governor gave distributions to all the entities and already wrote the check, cash is in the bank, of the $3,786,000. That's what we're referring to as the Gov 20 money.
And that's where this last motion, the money will come from.
And if you remember, I guess it was in June, the mayor kind of laid out a plan. This is where, he thinks that he's going to spend it. Then in August, we came back. That's when we knew that we were awarded, allocated, however you want to say it, $4,873,000. And we brought an amendment to you in August saying, we're not sure how we're going to spend this, but we've got to have it committed by October 31st. Everything has to be done by December 31st. And it's got to be all COVID related, and it was very strict. And so if you think of PPE, that we were buying masks and sanitizer all last fiscal year. We had the situation where we closed in April. So there was admin leave that was given to people for COVID related reasons to just stay home. We had emergencies through the federal government that we had to give our employees 10 days for emergency sick, extended FMLA, all these things that were coming in. So it's a whole lot of money all at once. So I tell you that background just to catch you up on where we are. So guidance came in, it said if an expense could be either the PA grant, the public assistance grant, or CARES grant, it has to be CARES. Where before, is like if it's obviously public assistance, it goes there. We're moving on through. and we're making these expenses. We came together and we said, what is the best utilization of this money? And it was our network infrastructure, our computer infrastructure, to get that tied down. And actually, that was almost 1.7 million. Almost 1.7 million of this CARES grant. They said that we believe that we could make a good case for that. But the question was, what if they say they don't buy our case? Well, that's where we've held the Gov 20 money off to the side to say if it fails with CARES, we'll fall back on the Gov 20 money. So then we came in, and part of it was they said if the personnel is directly to and addressing COVID, you could do those costs. You could claim those costs. So in the beginning, it was, well, obvious, we've got about 7, 8 employees that work for the health department. That's fine. Those were good. In the beginning, it was anybody else. You had to do timesheets. You had to explain exactly what they did with COVID and how it was all related. We moved forward in time. The rules changed, and they said, well, you know, anybody who is in public safety, they're just like the health department. They count. It's like, okay, we're going to claim every patrol officer, every detention officer, every ambulance guy for the period of July 1 to 9/30, plus all the expenses that we've done to date, plus expenses that we had in prior year. We have claimed $10 million in expense over and above what we got. So hopefully, we haven't got the check yet, but that is the hope that all those expenses will be covered, and then you look to the mayor and say, well, where did you spend the money that that you were getting? The biggest part of it was for the networking, the infrastructure, people being able to work from home and those things. There's a whole list. The phone system. I sent you the general capital projects today. If you looked at that third sheet, you can see some of the items that we had initially that the mayor had on how he was going to spend the Gov 20. We moved it to the CARES Act money, and 3 ambulances that have the UV lights in it. The phone system at the health department, we moved those that we were going to do out of Gov 20 and move that to the CARES Act. Those things are there. So all that to say, I'm hoping that we will ultimately have money that will go back to the general fund and cover these expenses. And I think that was one of the comments that Commissioner P said, is there any way that we can hold back this money? I'm hoping by doing this that we will ultimately have some money that will go back to the general fund. Commissioner Allen, you were asking about what's the push. I think the push was as the mayor said, is that was coming out of public safety. They wanted to move forward. The push for spending the money for me, is the governor's money has to be committed by June 30th of 21. So.
Well, because with Lisa's with her direction, we were submitted the whole thing, so it covers us for the total of the 4.9. It just made sense, and we felt more comfortable. We'll get all that reimbursed.
So we'll get our 4.7.
Yeah, 4.7 reimbursed, as opposed to maybe only 2 million or 3 million, because every community was struggling trying to figure out how to spend it and make it COVID related and go ahead and buy it and obligate your tax base to purchase it and then for it to get turned down. So this is a safe way for us to go ahead and turn in what we've expended for payroll, and then hopefully we'll be able to put some money back to the ending fund balance as well.
The other push on getting numbers for the this facility is that we've got to submit our application by December. We had to apply for our intent, just to tell them that we intended to apply at the end of October, but the application
For the brick grant.
for the brick grant is December 31st, but we needed these numbers from engineers to tell us what this stuff is going to cost when we apply.
Well, basically, Lisa, what you're explaining is just maybe the stipulations are becoming a little bit more flexible.
The way that we handled it, because we pretty much said all these payroll dollars that we have spent is what we are using to claim for this money that was given us under the CARES Act. But we've spent money for COVID-related stuff that's going to cover, that now will free up.
But it seems like some of the stipulations are not as stringent as they were in the beginning. Is that correct?
Exactly. I mean, it's not as stringent. It was terrible in August
Yeah, it was
and
changing.
September.
Every 2-3 weeks, it was changing. You know, it was hard to follow what they were coming in and saying. We're going, how are we going to be able to do this? And even trying to get quotes on a air conditioning system with UV lights in it. People were so busy in the mid-state area trying to get quotes from architects or contractors or anybody else that they might not even call you back, you know, because every other community was trying to do the same thing.
In the beginning, it all had to be completed by December 31st, but you had to commit it before November 1st. And that's one of the things that we were concerned about, all the network infrastructure. They could order it and keep our fingers crossed that the stuff is going to get here, and hopefully they would relax it to where they'd let us extend past December to implement, to get it in there. But there's just so much tying our hands, and I'm just glad that they relaxed the rules on what employees were deemed their work is COVID related, that we could just claim it all up front. Money's not in the bank yet, but like I said, and we did extra. I wanted to do extra because if there was a community that didn't spend their money and they have another round and they'd say, oh, poor Rutherford County, they spent $10 million. So anyway, I've been wanting to update y'all on where we were on this, and it kind of got, I was hoping by this time I would say the money's in the bank, but it's not.
Lisa, have you got that on SharePoint?
This is the Gov 20 money. It's not on SharePoint, but I sent that out to y'all. Just in total in the in the fund condition report, there's a summary. I'll tell you what page it's on. The account number that we're accounting for all the expenses that we made COVID, like what we thought we were doing, is 58804. Those expenses are just kind of summarized. I'll tell you what page it's on.
7 of 29.
7 of 29, Mark? Yeah, 7 of 29, it says COVID-19.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Allen. I have a question for Lisa.
Yeah, you're recognized. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, you said there were 3 grants. So it's the public assistance grant, which is the TEMA grant, the CARES grant, and then is the third one the BRIC grant? Is that right?
No, the third one is the governor's local support grant.
Gov 20.
I think it would be helpful to me, and maybe to others, but I know it would be helpful to me. The document that you sent out this morning that broke everything out on the capital projects, if you had something you could show us like this for each one of those grants so we could kind of see where the money's being spent out of each one. It's just a little bit tricky to follow. And I know when I walk away from this in 30 minutes, I won't be able to explain it again to somebody. So if there was any way you could map it out for us the way this is mapped out, this is very helpful. And I think it'd be worthwhile for us to be able to track all the dollars and all the
Yeah, I'll get you something. I'll get you something that way, because, you know, the gov money is in the capital projects fund. The CARES Act is in the general fund. The brick is nowhere until it happens, but if the brick happens, it will be in the capital projects fund.
Part of what we've been seeing, though, is she's had to bounce some of these requests from this grant to the other grant because they kept changing. You know, not because we thought it was a good idea, but they changed the rules. So to match their rules, you know, we're playing their game and trying to maximize the amount of money we can get. So I'm like Miss Allen. I'd like to see, you know, a breakdown of where it is, at least right now. It may change again.
I may draw a picture. I think pictures.
Yeah, I think
to
some
help you
lines
where
going,
it is.
some blocks and some lines.
Because we've had several grants come through that's even beyond this that you've seen.
Here's what I'm thinking about. You know how Miss Jolly, the project that she does for schools, she lets us see where the revenue is, how much of it's been spent, what it's been spent towards. Something along those lines is just kind of what I'm thinking. And so each month, you know, she has to end up revising it, you know, she does. So if we find out that, you know, there's either a new grant or something got disqualified from a grant, and you need to move that somewhere else, you know, to another section of that spreadsheet and label it somehow differently, that makes perfect sense to me. I know it's going to be kind of a moving target because of how fluid everything is, but I still think it's worthwhile for us to be able to track in one place all the grant money and where it's going and how we're spending it. And we probably need to keep track of, you know, what we're committing to spend, whether it's a match or whether it's been disqualified or whatnot. I mean, I want to be able to see the whole landscape at once, and right now I don't feel like I can.
Let's talk.
I had the same question out of public safety for Chris Clark, and I wanted to see the grants. I wanted to see what monies we were due to get in or what we had applied for, exactly how that's broke down. So I sympathize completely and agree. You know, I'd like to see that. It'd be nice if we could see it by next Thursday. Reckon we can make that happen? Or?
Well, when you say all the grants, really, the PA, it's really what we're spending on that, or sending to that, are things that we spent like last year. That's the mask and the things. So that's it's going to end up being just money coming in. The big pots of money are these two, the CARES and the governor's money. And you see what is the governor's money in the capital projects. I've got something that I think that might be helpful on the CARES money. Those two. The brick, what we were talking about, the brick piece of it would be a totally separate grant. We're going to use, what we've said tonight is that we're going to use a piece of the governor's money just for engineering. We may not get the brick. It's a totally separate and a piece apart from these two things that we're talking about. It's really no different from just that Coverdale grant that came in tonight. It's a grant, but it's a separate one all to itself. Is your question, you would like to know every grant that we got all year and how it was spent? That's a different thing. Or these pots of money, how these pots of money are being spent.
Yeah, it's really these pots of money, because what's going to happen is you're going to have, you know, we'll have conversations with constituents and they're going to say, what'd you spend the money on? And so I don't care if it's, you know, that we're basically reimbursing ourselves for something that we had, you know, bought last year, if that's what we spent the money on. I'm fine with that. I just want to be able to track the money whatever we spent the money on was worthwhile, and we can just speak intelligently about it. Because right now, like I said, you know, it's a bouncing ball and it's moving everywhere. I wouldn't be able to answer anybody's question right now on how we spent this money. I mean, I could probably talk in some, you know, big 30,000-foot conversations, but I wouldn't be able to have a real in-depth conversation with anybody about how we're spending this money, and I just want to be able to do that. And the other thing I thought about, Lisa, again, you were talking about being able to communicate in pictures. You know, the spreadsheet that Jeff Sandvig started for us, that Doug has continued, that basically even color-coded different fields. So we had all these schools listed, and, you know, if a block was, you know, shaded in blue, then that meant that it was funded. If it wasn't shaded, then it meant that the money was still out there, hadn't been allocated. So even anything like that, that just sort of helps us track what's been funded, or if you want to color code the grants or whatever. I don't want to make it hard on you. I'm just trying to think of tools we already use that maybe you can try to duplicate.
Well,
So-
I've already got, you know, I think I've displayed for you how we're spending the Gov 20 money. I mean, I think that is laid out. The CARES Act money, I've got something that I've prepared for the mayor today. I'll send that out and see if that answers your question.
Thank you.
Okay, Lisa, it is.
That's it.
Wrapped up, Mayor? Committee, any questions, comments? Hearing none, I believe that's completed our agenda, so I'm going to say this meeting is concluded. Good night.